Peace. Peace and blessings to y'all. How y'all doing? How y'all feeling? Yeah. I feel good. Feel good. Been feeling a little fatigued lately, a little tired lately, but I'm still doing good though. Hope everything's good with y'all. Hope you're feeling blessed. We all alive. We all here. That's an amazing blessing in of itself. And I feel very fortunate to be here with y'all. Hopefully things are going well for everybody. So today what we're going to talk about is I want to start a new series called the Quantum Quran series. The Quantum Quran series will be similar to my Quantum Bible series, where I took parts of the Bible and broke it down and show how there's a connection between what the Bible is saying and between modern day scientific discoveries. For those of y'all who had a chance to see it, the Quantum Bible series can be found here on my channel. I discuss the dual morning star system. I discuss triple alpha process. When I talked about how the cherubim, the seraphim, and the ophanim, how there's certain numbers that are associated with those kinds of angels, and those numbers are a reflection of particles on the periodic table, and that they are connected to the triple alpha process, the process by which large stars can make carbon, which brings life into the universe. And we also talk about bioluminescence and things of that nature. Now I want to talk about some things that I've discovered in the Quran that clearly show modern day a connection between modern day science and modern day scientific discoveries. Now, there is a Sufi mystic by the name of Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi was a man who is known as the ultimate sheikh to some Muslims. To some Muslims, he's considered to be a blasphemer. But he is an individual who wrote a wide array of books. Among them, there was a book I read called The Four Pillars of Spiritual Transformation. Really good book. The White Pearl, Meccan Revelations. And he is the guy who is known amongst scholars of Islam as the person who put forth the proposition that Allah is everything, that the only reality is Allah and everything else is strictly illusory, which I found to be quite fascinating and in alignment with a lot of what I believe. I was reading the book of Ibn Arabi's work, and in the book is called The White Pearl. I actually got it on my phone on Kindle. And there's a part of the White Pearl. There's among the themes of the White Pearl. There's something called the fundamental element. Now, there's certain phrases that Ibn Arabi keeps using in the book, The White Pearl. The fundamental element, the perfect human being, and there's another one I forgot what it was. But he keeps using these same phrases over and over again. But it's not quite clear exactly what specifically he's talking about. In particular, the phrase "the fundamental element." He's talking about the fundamental building block of all reality, the building block upon which all reality is built, that one element, that one source from which everything else comes forth. And as he's breaking down and describing what the fundamental element is, there's a very interesting phrase that he uses. He says, I could reveal what the fundamental element is, but I've taken an oath not to reveal it to the world. Essentially, what he's saying is, or what he's revealing subtly, is that he is a member of an order. He is a person who seems to have been in a secret society. When we think of secret society, we think of malevolent, evil people who are trying to conquer the world and destroy the world. But in many instances, these secret societies were scientists who were just terrified of what would happen if they put their scientific revelations out into the world. There is a collection of books by some Muslim mystics. The books are called the Ikhwan al-Safa or something like that, which translates to the Brothers of Purity or the Brothers of Righteousness. These brothers had written some what they call epistles or letters, basically explaining their concepts of reality. So there would be letters talking about what time is, the cyclical nature of time, the cyclical nature of the universe. They will be talking about how man was created, how the universe came into being. So they were talking about a lot of things that may have been frowned upon during the time in which they lived. So some of the information that they had to kind of keep secret and communicate to each other secretly, not because they were malevolent, but simply because this information, if it had been revealed, people may have not been ready for it. Keep in mind, this is during a period of time when people living under, really strict Islamic theocracies. So they may have gotten in severe trouble for coming up with these ideas as Muslim men, saying this is what we believe about things. So The Islamic world, as well as the Christian world and the Jewish world, was filled with individuals who had spiritual knowledge that they felt it would be in their best interest to keep hidden, simply because everybody else was following a different program. And if they came forth with a level of truth that people were not prepared for, they would be punished, perhaps even killed. Ibn Arabi, I believe, was a member of one of those groups. He was a Sufi, therefore he was in a Sufi order. And it stands to reason that it's quite possible that this Sufi order may have taught some things that may have been frowned upon by mainstream Islamic theocracy. Now, having said that, I want to make it clear that the reason why I mention all of this is because I want you to see that there's a connection between what people were being taught spiritually in these Sufi orders and the things that are being taught in Islam and science. These individuals were not just mystics and they were not just superstitious. Much of what they were doing was scientific contemplation. Even if their thinking was mystical, even if their thinking was superstitious, they were making an attempt to have an understanding of the world and how the world works. And so throughout the Bible, throughout the Quran, there are attempts to understand reality, the nature of reality, the origins of reality, the origins of life. There's a lot of attempts, some successful, some not successful, to explain the nature of things in these spiritual texts. So I want people to understand that there's not necessarily a separation between spirituality and science, right? So let's begin. The first thing I want to talk about is the creation of life in the universe itself. The Quran, of course, teaches that Allah came first, and that Allah is the original and the originator. Allah looked into the universe and said, kun, fayakun, be, and it is. And then the universe came into being. Now, the first thing that came into being, the first life that he created in the universe, according to Islamic tradition, are the angels. And then I read somewhere that the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, Aisha, mentioned that the angels were made of, let's say, is nur. Nur is incorporeal light, divine light, pure light, holy light. So these angels are made of light. They are divine beings who don't exist in a physical body. They exist in a light body. Their bodies consist of a divine light, different from our own light in the universe, right? Next to come into the universe before there was mankind or humanity were the Jinn. The Jinn are beings that are made of smokeless fire. So they are made of fire, but there's no smoke, which means that there's nothing being combusted. There's nothing being burned. The fire exists of its own accord, separate from anything else fueling it. So it's a magical, supernatural fire, right? Last but not least is mankind, and mankind is made from the clay. And mankind is made from the clay, but that clay body of ours, that body of ours that came from the earth, will die, which is a reflection of what I refer to as the biocosmos. Look at our own bodies, look within our own bodies, and we can see the nature of reality and the nature of the cosmos itself. Our bodies are born and will die. The universe is born and will die. We'll get back to that later on in the conversation. Now, scientists nowadays subscribe to a model called the Big Bang. The Big Bang theory basically says that all reality started off in a single point, about the size of an atom, or maybe even smaller than an atom. But all the material, everything in the universe started off at one single teeny tiny little point. And then suddenly something happened. Nobody knows what exactly occurred, but all this matter, all this material that was in this single point exploded outward and went out, creating space and time and carrying with it all the nascent material that will become our universe, right? Now, in the Quran, Surah 21, Ayat 31, it says, "Do not unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were a closed up mass? Then we clothed them asunder, and we made from water every living thing." Now, there's two things that are being said here. First and foremost, it's saying that everything in the universe was all together. It was all lumped up together. It was a lumped up together mass. And then God, Allah, split it apart. Through the force of his power and his will, he split apart this mass and made the entire universe. And then also it goes on to say that all life, every living thing came out of the water. And science says the exact same thing, that life began in water, began an evolutionary process. So it's right there in the Quran as well, which I consider to be quite fascinating that individuals from that long ago, without any kind of scientific equipment, were able to intuit these things about the nature of reality. It makes you wonder if there was some grand revelation, some being that brought forth this information secretly to them and gave them this information. It's quite fascinating to see right there in plain words that the universe started off as a single point where all the matter and material of the universe was, and then something happened that split it asunder. That something, according to our Muslim brothers, was Allah. Allah is the one who tore it asunder and took that raw material that made the universe, and then from that raw material made life and the water. Our bodies are 70% water, so even us, we began in the water as well. We're began in the water, and we're living in water right now. We're living in this body. This body is water, so the spirit is living within the water. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. That water is important for spirit. Now, next, there's also something else. According to the Big Bang Theory, right? The whole universe, the material of the universe started off in one single point, one single small point. Then it was torn asunder and began to expand. And it continues to expand. Scientists are saying that even now the universe is continuing to grow and expand. And they're looking at the way the light is traveling in the universe towards the earth, and they're saying, well, it seems as if these celestial bodies are moving away from us. It seems as if the boundaries of this thing that we call the universe are growing rapidly, and planets and stars and everything are kind of flying rapidly away from the center of the universe where everything began, away from the I guess they would call it the event horizon. They would call it the event horizon, that point where everything began and then exploded outward. Everything is kind of shooting away from that rapidly. So they're saying the universe is continuing to expand. And in Surah 51, Ayat 48, and the heaven we built with our powers, and indeed we go on expanding it. So it's talking about the universe itself continuing to expand after the lumped up mass of material that started off the universe was torn asunder by unknown powers, right? By the power of God. It was pulled apart by these unknown powers, or unknown to science. And then once it was pulled apart, it continued to expand rapidly because the force of that initial explosion that brought life into the universe was so powerful that everything went shooting out, and it continues. It's still exerting itself because of the force of that initial explosion in that vacuum that we call space, right? Another thing that's really, really interesting is the fact that they say that angels came first, made of light. Jinn were made of fire. Man is made of clay. Well, that's what they say. That's how they say the universe came into being. First, it was this bright, big, huge explosion that we call the Big Bang, and it was just a blinding flash of raw energy, a blinding flash of light, right? So light came first. The angels came first life in the universe, right? Light in the universe came first. It's a huge explosion of light. So magnificent and so bright and so loud. And then, right after the light, everything was so hot from that initial flash of light. It was raw energy, so everything was still hot. It was so hot, scientists say, that matter couldn't form. Matter couldn't form initially in the universe because the temperature was so high that the atoms couldn't come together and stay together. Just like when you have anything in the material world, if you have a rock, or if you have a tree or a block of wood or anything, metal, anything that you have, once it gets too hot, what does it do? It melts and it breaks down, and it takes on a different form, and it eventually can just be burned up into an evanescence, right? Well, it's the same thing with all matter and material in the universe. Once it gets too hot, it can't stay together. The atoms can't stay together, and it disintegrates. So the material in the universe, the original material of the universe, was so hot that it couldn't coalesce and come together to form matter, and it couldn't form elements, right? Then after a very long period of time, perhaps billions of years, it cooled down enough where you begin to see elements form. What were the first things to form? The first things to form were these highly explosive and unstable gases. Because keep in mind, things are still hot. So things are still not quite stable. Things are still so hot. They're still completely unstable. So the first things to form are unstable gases. And then from those unstable gases, you get fire. So first comes the light, the angels, and then comes the fire, the Jinn. Ain't that amazing? And then after a while, this blazing hot fire, and this raw energy of the universe cools down even more, and the atoms began to come together and form molecules, because now it's cool enough for it to begin to form material, to form matter. So before, everything was in this, you can even think about it as spirit. Everything was in the form of spirit. Before even fire, things were in a raw form of light, which is spirit itself. So this is the spirit of the universe. Then it cools down a little bit. Now imagine how hot it had to be, where it had to cool down to make fire. That's hot, where it's hotter than fire itself. And it cooled down and you made fire. And that's symbolized by Djinn, by the passion, right? And then eventually it cools down even more, and it makes material, it makes matter, and from that material, from that matter, begins the process of the creation of human life, mortal life, right? So right there, in a symbolic sense, they're breaking down the nature of reality itself, just in saying the angels, the jinn, and then man, just giving us those three things in that particular order explains so much about the nature of reality itself and how things came into being. And here is clearly, blatantly telling you that the universe is continuing to expand. And what's going to happen after the universe expands and expands and expands? Well, space and time is limited. Therefore, material within space and time is limited. And what happens when something is limited and it reaches its boundaries? It can't go any further. But what happens when the universe itself, when it's going that fast, when it can't go any further, what's going to happen? Well, scientists theorize that it's going to collapse back in onto each other. That all this material is like a rubber band, going to stretch all the way out until it can't go any further. And once it pushes, it reaches its boundary and begins to push at its boundaries, and it slowly, slowly, slowly comes back, and then it crashes together. And scientists refer to this as the Big Crunch. The Big Crunch is what happens at the end of, literally at the end of space and time. There's a space-time continuum. Space and time move together. But space is limited, therefore time is limited. Weirdly enough. So because space is limited, time is limited. So once you reach a certain point, space and time come to an end. There's no more space. Can't go no further. And therefore there's no more time. And when that happens, everything comes crashing right back to the beginning, and the cycle starts over again. And it says in the Quran, Surah 21, Ayat 106. Surah 21 is actually pretty interesting. I think that's the one I found where it was just so much. Yeah, that was the one. There was just so much in it. Surah 21, so much in Surah 21. Even if you're not a Muslim, I'm not a Muslim, but I study everything, and I'm fascinated by mystical Islam and what it has to offer and what it teaches. It's beautiful. Look at Surah 21. It's fascinating. Surah 21. Remember the day when we shall roll up the heavens like the rolling up of a written scroll. So imagine that. It's saying that the way you roll up a scroll, you roll out a scroll, and you roll it back up again, right? Same thing with the universe. You stretch out space and time, it reaches its end, and it comes right back again. So they're saying that basically they're going to just roll everything back up again. Imagine beings that powerful. Imagine a being that powerful, where this universe is something. It's comparing ending space and time to just rolling up a scroll. I'm just going to roll up the scroll, put it right back together again, right? That's amazing. The Big Crunch is spoken about in the Quran. And then after the Big Crunch, what comes next? Well, after the Big Crunch comes rebirth, the recreation of the universe. So the universe begins with the Big Bang. Angels are formed, light. The jinn are formed, fire. Man is formed, matter. Space and time stretch out, expanding rapidly, so that all these heavenly bodies and the celestial bodies are kind of speeding away from each other quickly. So all these solar systems and all these galaxies are spiraling fast as heck away from each other and spreading away from each other. And then when it can't go any further, when it can't go anywhere else, you literally reach the end of space and time. Everything comes crashing back onto itself again, like it's like you're rolling up a scroll. And then everything begins again. The process begins again. There's a mystic named Said Guru who says that he, in his meditations, he came to the revelation that the universe has done this Big Bang, Big Crunch recreation process 80. I think he said 86 times. I don't know how he came to that number, but I think it's fascinating that he feels like he hit the number. I don't know how he came to that conclusion, but that's interesting. But in the Quran, Surah 21, once again, Surah 21 is fascinating. It's full of interesting things you can pick apart and analyze. Surah 21 of Ayat 105, As we began the first creation, so shall we repeat it. A promise binding on us that we shall certainly fulfill. Now, that in and of itself is highly fascinating. You began the first creation and you're going to repeat the creation process. First question you're going to ask is, how many times has the creation process gone on? And what were the other creations? What happened in the other creations? Did they go through the same thing we went through? Was there a different path for them? I mean, of course, these are just questions. Nobody can really know for sure. But I think it's good to ask these questions. And also, it says a promise binding on us that we shall certainly fulfill. Now, this is exactly what it said in the Quran. What is this us and who is this we that they're talking about? Now, like I said, I'm not a Muslim, so I would need to ask a Muslim that question. But the most honorable Elijah Muhammad said that this us and this we is the same us and we spoken of in the Bible when it says, "Let us create man in our image." He says that this is a group of hyper intelligent. Not even you can't even really. He says they're 24 scientists, but they're like that word scientist is too weak. These guys are hyper intelligent geniuses who have the capacity to read the thinking of the masses and shape human history. And so the us and the we is interesting and mysterious. And then on top of that, it says that recreating the universe is a promise. And it's a binding promise, meaning that this is a promise that even if they wanted to, they couldn't put it aside. They're bound by the promise. They can't break the promise. They promised to continue to do it. Well, who made the promise? Who was the promise made to? What being is so powerful that these beings that created the universe and will end the universe and then recreate the universe, they have to continue to do this process at the bidding of this being they promised to? And what exactly was the promise? I mean, these are just questions. These are just speculations. I don't have any answers, but I consider that kind of thinking. Some people might consider it to be dangerous, but I think that kind of thinking just draws you closer into what you believe. If you're a Muslim and you ask these questions with a pure heart, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with trying to understand the teachings in your sacred text a little bit more. I recommend that for anybody who wants to draw closer to God. Draw closer to God with questions because you don't know, just like your dad. I wish my father was around so I could ask him some questions. But as a little kid, that's how you get to know your father. You get to know more about him by asking questions. Hey, Dad, what's this? Hey, Dad, have you ever? My kids ask me so many questions. Hey, Dad, have you ever been in a fight? Hey, Dad, have you ever been in the woods? Hey, Dad, have you ever slept outside? Hey, Dad, you ever went camping? They got a million questions all day, every day. Why? Because they want to get to know me better. So I can't get upset with that. They just want to know their dad better. And if God is our Father, Yahweh, Allah, Shiva, Vishnu, whatever name you give to the Supreme, we want to know better. We got to ask questions. We got to take that first step. And in that movie Malcolm X, they said, you take one step toward Allah, he'll take 10 steps towards you. Maybe that question is a step. People shouldn't be so terrified of questions. Most people who are terrified of questions are lying. When I was married, if I was nervous about something I was trying to conceal, not because I was doing anything like infidelity, nothing like that. But if I made a mistake and didn't want my wife to find out about it, I'd be so jumpy when she started asking questions. I'd be so nervous. That's typically how people are. When you start asking questions and people get violent and aggressive, you're trying to hide something. Don't let people who trying to hide something keep you from getting closer to your God or to your dreams or to anything. The truth don't need to hide. The truth is beautiful. But people sometimes conceal the truth when they feel like other individuals around them can't handle it. Just like some people who might look at the Quran and see all this science in the Quran, but they can't tell lay people because lay people might not understand. Like when I used to be a Christian, I used to discuss the Bible. A lot of times people wouldn't understand. But anyhow, that's my video for right now. And I will see y'all later. Peace and blessings to everybody who's going to watch this. Stay happy, stay healthy. Get your prayers in and make sure you meditate every single day. Peace.